And now, coming up next on our great channel, Blast and the Past, and... Apologies, but I've just received a shocking piece of news. And apologies, we interrupt your regularly scheduled programming in order to bring you this breaking news. It seems that our beautiful country, America, the United States, is under an imminent threat from the Soviet Union. I don't know any details yet, but I will keep you posted, so please remain close to the TV sets and await further updates. As long as I have more pieces of information on this situation, I will not hesitate to bring them to you as soon as possible. Thank you, Godspeed, and also God bless our American nation and our beautiful country. Let's only hope that our president will resolve this unexpected situation in an amicable manner. Thank you very much.
The President will be speaking on all stations shortly. Stand by for this message.
What you've just witnessed before was a hypothetical situation of what might have happened in the 1960s and the 1970s during the Cold War era, when there was something in the air, when it seemed that the upcoming conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union was more than a sure thing. The threat was imminent and the peril was coming. It was just around the corner because of the tension between the two countries, and especially in the opinion of many experts, it was the red country which might have turned out to be the assailant out of those two.
We don't hit them hard and hit them now, we may never get a second chance.
In this one, sir, there are no military geniuses.
Two choices.
The fate of this planet may be riding with you.
One chance for survival. An all-star cast in the HBO original movie by Dawn's Early Light. Premieres May 19th.
In the more or less modern cinema, we've had many productions dealing with this particular topic of the conflict, the armed conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union at that time in the 1960s. And one of them is by Dawn's Early Light from 1990, directed by Jack Shoulder and starring a star-studded cast. We have such big names as Powers Boothe, Rebecca De Mornay, Peter MacNicol, Martin Landau, James Earl Jones, and Rip Torn in one film, in a TV production produced by HBO. Although the budgetary constraints are a little bit visible here and there in the narrative, it doesn't matter at all, because the film is extremely gripping and captivating, and trust me, throughout the whole narrative, throughout the whole plot, you will be clenching your fists, grinding your teeth, and you will be at the edge of your seats in front of your TV set. That's how thrilling this narrative is.
We are under attack. We certainly wouldn't fire a missile.
And what the film may lack in its panache, it compensates for it in spades, with its atmosphere, the climate, and how well it is directed. Although the perspective presented therein is pretty gloomy and ominous, we have to be aware that it was very close at that time in the 1960s, when the tension was in the air, something was in the air, the threat of the nuclear attack, the nuclear threat, and the peril of that, and the scare permeating the whole nation and even the whole world. That was a real threat back then. And in the modern times, in the year 2023, I think that the topic is up to date more than ever before.
3 minutes.
If we don't hit them hard and hit them now, we may never get a second chance.
Regarding the other films dealing with the topic of an imminent nuclear threat, which is a real peril, there have been many films devoted to that also in the 1980s. So you had The Day After with Steve Guttenberg, a very good film.
1 millisecond takes you beyond imagining, beyond tomorrow, and into the day after.
Threats from the 1980s, again, I think 1984, and that was a very realistic, even an ultra-realistic portrayal of what could happen if somebody did decide to drop a bomb, and how the post-apocalyptic world in reality could look like, and it is very shocking. I remember actually I watched it during the outbreak of We All Know What, around 2-3 years ago, and that was even more shocking because I could a little bit relate to that. I remember that the streets were empty, etc. But there was also a loser take on that idea, presented in War Games by Peter Hyams with Matthew Broderick, and it is a great semi-family flick. But the message presented therein is very serious. That everybody who is in the possession of the nuclear power has not only a destructive tool at their disposal, but it comes with the territory, so a lot of responsibility. And we have to remember that.
Russians are still denying everything, sir.
Who are you working with?
Nobody.
I don't have.
But all the films I've just mentioned are definitely worth recommending and seeing, and By Dawn's Early Light is one of them. Although it's from the 1990s and it's a smaller scale production because it's a TV film, nonetheless, I think that it's worth checking out. And like I said, especially that it is very up to date in terms of its topic and the conflict presented therein and what potentially could happen and it could lead to. And when there is an assailant force trying to impose their values on the other one, so rarely does it end with a happy ending, unfortunately. And here is a short plot summary presented on the IMDb website. A non-NATO nuclear missile is fired from Turkey at USSR, where it detonates. Soviet response is automatic as it's seen as a NATO missile. Can continued escalation be avoided? And right now a more elaborate plot summary, thanks to Keith Law, also featured on the IMDb website. The crew of a nuclear bomber attacked the Soviet Union, while the President of the United States tries desperately to regain control of his military after his helicopter crashes during a limited nuclear exchange. Originally a made-for-cable movie, this film concentrates on the relationship between a veteran pilot and his female co-pilot, and the President's attempt to wrest control away from a warmongering successor. Props to Keith Law.
We can order our B-52s on a grand tour of the Soviet Union.
Trust me, this film is no fairy tale because it presents a very realistic, harsh, gritty grip on the problem presented therein. So a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, which is sparked by an accidentally by a glitch in the system. But alas, the repercussions are real, and there are casualties of war also among civilians, and one side decides to follow up on the attack, the other decides to reply, and it may never come to an end, because if one side doesn't want to step back, give in, the other one will not do it either. And this is the biggest conundrum, what to do in such a tense situation. Because if there is no will, there is no way. But if there is a will, there is a way, always, to find some amicable solution, as long as there is a mutual cooperation between the two nations. So this is one of the key points of the narrative. And like I said, trust me, you will be glued to the TV screen, biting your nails, because of the thrill it gives you, it projects on you, until the very end of the narrative.
0530 Zulu. It was not fired by US forces. The Soviets had chosen to launch a strike against us.
Although the film may have its shortcomings because of the budget, it also has many advantages, like even the star-studded cast. So many recognizable names in one project, in one TV project, in one made-for-the-cable flick. This is unthinkable, but I'm sure that they just saw the potential in that, and they desperately wanted to be a part of this film. And I don't know too much about the director, but generally so I think that the script was just enough to convince them to participate in this film. To me, this is mind-blowing that you have so many recognizable and acclaimed names as Martin Landau playing the role of the President of the United States, Powers Boothe and Rebecca De Mornay as romantically involved pilots of a bomber which is crucial in this narrative. You have James Earl Jones with his great, fantastic, famous voice.
Now I am the master.
And Rip Torn as a power-obsessed military man. And Peter MacNicol as the president's assistant, a faithful one. The film has many merits, and although it flew under the radar because it was a cable film, unfortunately, a TV production, I think that it is worth checking out. And like I said, in the current political turmoil, the global situation, what is going on in some parts of the world, I think that it is a must-watch, a must-see.
I'd say 50,000 people just died.
situation room?
There is some piece of bad news, unfortunately. I'm really disappointed with the picture quality of this DVD release. So it is a box edition. As you can see, the cover looks very great. It shows you what the film is about. The front, the back. So to be honest, I had really high expectations in terms of the picture quality. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a big disappointment, a big letdown, because the picture is very blurred, it lacks the details, the colors are murky. I know it's only a DVD release, but come on, you could expect much better from a normal box DVD edition. It looks like it might have been just ripped off a VHS tape, and on top of that, a not very well preserved one. So I think that this is exactly what might have happened with this transfer. So it is a bit of a disaster, but trust me, once you start watching it, you forget about the picture quality. It stops mattering. It doesn't matter at all. What does matter is the gripping narrative and the script and the scenario and how well it keeps developing later on. And like I said, it's not even bittersweet, and there are a lot of surprises in terms of the characters, how they end up, and how the whole conflict is resolved. So you want to check it out, that's for sure, despite of the picture quality, regardless of it, of this disastrous picture quality. You should have this film in your collection, and especially right now in the current situation. That's a high recommendation from myself, despite of this lousy picture quality. I'm not afraid of using this word. As a film collector, I'm fairly disappointed. I'm utterly disappointed, alas, but what can you do? It's a guessing game. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss, and you never know, unfortunately.
Implement 2-1 zebra.
Yes, sir. It'll take a few minutes, sir.
Are you stalling me, Alice?
And now some pieces of trivia regarding the film. The first one is about this computer presented on the screen. The computer in NORAD is made up from components of an actual IBM AN/FSQ-7 Combat Direction Central built in 1954 to protect the US from Soviet bomber attack. Components of decommissioned systems were sold for scrap and bought by film and television production companies that wanted futuristic-looking computers despite the fact they were built in the 1950s. Components used in this film were previously used in The Time Tunnel from 1966, War Games from 1983, among many others, and later used in Failsafe from 2000. Another piece of trivia. This is the final film to depict a fictional World War III prior to the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, aka the Soviet Union, aka Russia. The Matei World Digital website states, By Dawn's Early Light from 1990, produced in the 1980s, was the last of the What If the Weapons Get Loose Cold War suspense thrillers released before the fall of the Soviet Union.
I have the authenticator card. Dayward.
And another piece of trivia about the main characters. The differences between this television adaptation and its source novel are summarized by the Wikipedia website, which states that there are two major differences between the story of its source novel and this filmed telemovie adaptation. It says, the first being that the crisis in the novel is started by a deliberate Soviet attack to counter the US military buildup, with which they are unable to compete, and the other major difference in the film is in the romantic subplot between Moreau, Rebecca De Mornay, and Cassidy, Powers Boothe, which is absent from the book. The characters themselves actually mocking the idea of such a relationship between them.
Alright, gang, what's the drill? Do I shut him down or what?
Another piece of trivia. This is the second Cold War-based nuclear thriller to derive its title from the lyrics to the song The Star-Spangled Banner. The first was Twilight's Last Gleaming from 1977, starring Burt Lancaster. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I do have this film on Blu-ray somewhere, so maybe if I find it in my collection, I will review it, since I've watched this one recently, so maybe it's time to follow up on this topic with another flick of this sort. At least in terms of Twilight's Last Gleaming on Blu-ray, I'm pretty positive that the picture quality must be better than this disastrous, lousy, horrible DVD release. There is also a very thrilling scene regarding the contact between the President of the United States and the President of the Soviet Union, in which they try to resolve the conflict. Although the President of the United States is temporarily not in power due to some unforeseen, unexpected circumstances in the plot, in the narrative, and there is even a call between them, and the President of the Soviet Union says, "This is the President of the Soviet Union. I would like to contact the President of America, the President of the United States, because I have some pieces of information for him. We need to resolve this conflict as soon as possible to avoid a nuclear disaster." Nobody believes him. Nobody believes that this is the President of the Soviet Union, because they believe that they might just be being tricked by the Soviets or by the rebellions or whoever orchestrated the attack, the nuclear attack. And of course the President of the Soviet Union loses his temper and he starts insulting them. So it's off the screen, but probably it must have been something like this, along these lines. "You better contact me with your president, you sobaka, otherwise we will be finished, the world will be finished. I command you to give me the President of America, the President of United States right now, because everything is at stake. Do you understand, soldier? I need to contact the President." But finally he does reach the President, because it's a good faith gesture on the side of everybody involved. Because if the stakes are so high, the future of the whole world is at stake, so sometimes you have to make compromises.
The most powerful enemy can be defeated only by the utmost effort and by seizing every opportunity.
And sometimes you also have to act in good faith. Despite the reasoning, you simply have to follow your heart and your guts and not your brains. You have to act against the logic, the rationale, and even in conflict with the existing military procedures, but this is the price that needs to be paid. If there is a major conflict, so sometimes, like in the film Crimson Tide from the 1990s, starring Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman, so you have to follow your own logic and what you think is right, and the procedures may not be up to date or they may be archaic and obsolete, so you have to follow your gut feeling.
The battle for survival begins. That's a message fragment. So we don't know what this...
There is also one glaring goof mentioned on the IMDb website. In the opening scene, the various military alert levels are referred to as roundhouse, cocked pistol, etc. These designations are only used during exercises to ensure that there is no confusion as to whether an actual change in alert status is being ordered. However, in an actual crisis, such as the one depicted, the statuses would be referred to by their DEFCON, defense condition numbers, from DEFCON 5 for peacetime readiness up to DEFCON 1 for maximum readiness, namely war.
Sir, impact in less than 6 minutes. You're wasting time, sir, your own.
In terms of the director, Jack Shoulder, I think that he was most active in the 1980s because he directed also normal films, not TV productions, just as the second part of Nightmare on Elm Street, and he followed it up with the film The Hidden with Kyle MacLachlan from 1987, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a very good science fiction flick. I haven't seen it for a long time, I also have it somewhere in my collection.
A career in the police didn't really prepare you for this, did it?
The Hidden.
And Renegades with Kiefer Sutherland and Lou Diamond Phillips from 1989. I also have it somewhere.
Renegades.
Later on he slowed down a little bit and he directed mostly TV films, but apparently that was his domain because he was very good at it, and like in this case, he managed to squeeze every single cent out of the budget. Because the budgetary constraints are visible, and I don't know how much of a budget it had, but since it was a made-for-cable film, I don't expect it to have been very high. Regardless of that, despite the panache, everything is there, and the set pieces are fantastic, especially in the center of command with this computer.
Damn targets of the Soviet Union.
with many diode lights and bleeping elements, and this is very atmospheric. So it is reminiscent of war games from the 1980s, but this is obvious because they used the same computer, like I mentioned in one of the pieces of trivia. Props to the director, because although he was mostly a TV director and his apex in terms of the bigger budget films was in the 1980s, still he managed to continue his career throughout the 1990s and albeit at the beginning of the 2000s. So props to Jack Shoulder.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
The music composed for this film may not be very vivid, but it's not imposing either, so I think that it plays along with the narrative very well. There's not much to say about it, I think. It is just so well composed with the plot and with what is going on the screen that really I don't remember too much of it. So probably it can't have been very bad, but it can't have been extremely good either. It was just a decent job. It was a well composed soundtrack, so maybe a little bit low key, but in a good meaning, because it never throws you off of the narrative, and that's a good thing if it blends in organically and naturally with the film.
The target is symbolic, as this is the base from which you would leave Washington.
I really hope that you will decide to give this film a chance, because it's worth it, it deserves it. And probably you may find it on a streaming platform somewhere in a much better picture quality, so it's a bit unfair to the collectors, but what can you do? If it's available somewhere in HD, please give it a go. Nonetheless, even if the picture quality is not there, the overall quality is there, because the narrative, the scenario, how well it's depicted, how it moves swiftly from one point to another, how full of surprises it is along the way, I can almost guarantee you that it will be a satisfactory screening if you decide to give it a chance, if you decide to give it a go. Do I need to say more? You have a star-studded cast featured in this film. Boothe, Rebecca De Mornay, Martin Landau, James Earl Jones, Rip Torn, Peter MacNicol. So many recognizable, well-known actors and actresses in the narrative. This is one of the biggest selling points of this film, and if all of them decided to partake in this project, I think that they must have done it for a very good reason.
Roll. I need you now. Come on down and pull yourself together.
If it's not for the merits of the plot alone and the narrative and how up to date it is right now in the political climate of this decade, 2020s, and this year 2023, so also it would be for the cast.
You're lucky, Mr. President. You get what I want, a second chance.
I don't follow you, General.
Sir, this is just for openers.
In terms of the cast, I don't know whom I should praise more, because everybody does a great, fantastic job. Boothe as the main pilot of the bomber, Rebecca De Mornay as his love interest and his co-pilot. There is a nice chemistry between them. And Martin Landau as the president, so it was before Ed Wood, another great performance. He was a very well-known actor, a very experienced one, so that was a no-brainer. James Earl Jones with his fantastic voice, he also plays a strong type. And there is Rip Torn as a shady, power-obsessed military guy, a general, if I'm not mistaken. And Peter MacNicol, so I can't praise the cast enough. Everybody is on the top of their game, so this is just another selling point of this otherwise also great film.
Will somebody give me a cigarette? A real cigarette!
Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you will listen to my recommendation. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming in order to bring you this breaking news. We've just received a piece of information that the conflict has been averted. Finally, an agreement has been reached between the United States and the Soviet Union, between our American president and the president of the Soviet Union. There will be no conflict. There will be a general disarmament in terms of the nuclear weapons. No one will be in possession of this destructive force at their disposal, at the press of the red button. Thankfully, we have successfully managed to avert what might have been the end of our civilization. Let's rejoice and let's celebrate this moment, because this is another Independence Day in our history. If you want to stay up to speed with the current information, please remember to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for your attention. Please share the good news with everybody that we have made it out of this whole predicament alive, sound and safe. Thank you, Godspeed, and also God bless the whole world. Let us stay in peace and live amicably. Thank you very much.